Hey everyone, so I'm going to take my scrap bin, which I have right here, and turn it into a project. So I'm going to work on a couple different projects, but one of my favorite is covering composition books. I've done quite a few different ones, so I'll show you one that I did today. Now, as usual, I will do some speed ups of this, but I will have it available on my YouTube in the full video. For this project, I'm going to use a scrap piece of batting. This is left over from a quilt, and this is about 26 inches long. So I need for this to be long enough to wrap around the book, and then for how many ever inches it needs to wrap on the inside of the book. And so it may not go all the way to the edge, which is fine. As long as that flap is about midway through, I'm good. So I want that to be able to do the same on the front and the back. In addition to that, this piece also has to have enough room at the top and the bottom for the seams. Once I finish quilting this as you go, because that's what this is going to be, then I can square it up to meet the measurements of this book that I need. And you ask, what are the measurements? So for this book, you can use your mat and you just open the book up so that you can measure it. And let me show you a different angle. Okay. Using my mat, I can lay the book out open, line it up, because it doesn't matter where, as long as we know how to count. And we're going to just count over the squares. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So this is approximately 15 inches across. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And it's 10 inches tall. So that's important because whatever I do, whatever I use for this, I need for it to be at least finished 15 by 10. Because I want this to close and not be real tight, then I need some wiggle room here in the spine. So I do want a little bit of flexibility, so I'm going to add an allowance for that. And maybe about 1/4 inch to 1 inch is no more than what I need, but I need something to be able to close it so that it closes with ease and it's not a tight fit. Seam allowances, when I sew, it's up to you. You can use a 1/2 inch seam allowance, you could use a 1/4 inch, but whatever you do, it's the same on both sides. So if I add 1/2 here and a 1/2 here, that means 15 now becomes 16. If I add 1/4 and a 1/4, 15 now becomes 15 and a 1/2. If I add that little bit of allowance in there, then it would be 15 3/4, or I would just take it up to 16. The same way, if I go with the 1/2, then it would be 16 already, so I'd make a 16 and a 1/2. Same thing going from top. This would be 10 inches, and then if I have the seam allowances on the side, depending what I use, it would be 10 and a 1/2, or it would be 11, depending on what I'm using for my seam allowances. So totally up to you how you want to go with this. I do want this to fit inside of that little pocket, and I may not want it to be snug, so I could add an extra 1/4 of an inch just to give it some room. But you can play around with it and see how it goes. If you're quilting it, it's also important to add that little extra because you're going to have thickness that everything is going to have to get through, and you want to account for that as well. So once I determine my book, and most composition books are standard, so I determine what I have, now I need to determine what it's going to look like. So laying this out, I can get my fabrics and make some decisions about what I want this to look like, or it could be completely scrappy. A lot of times I will have strips, and I can take those strips and I can open them up and I can lay them out anywhere along here that I want them to go. So they could go straight. They could also go in a diagonal. The only thing that I need to be careful of is that if I go in a diagonal, because I'm doing a quilt as you go, I do want some of the edge to go over the edge of this. And remember, you're going to square it up. So if this is wider than your book, even if it doesn't quite reach the edge just a little bit, it's not going to matter because it'll get caught up in the trim. I am going to just do an easy quilt as you go, and I have decided that I will just, kind of press and just do this as, straight lines with strips. So I'm going to get my strips together, and then we'll meet me at the sewing machine. So here we go. We have all of our strips that have been cut and are ready to assemble here on this. So you could either take each of your strips, they can go up and down, they can go sideways, fully up to you. The first strip is going to get laid right sides up, depending on whatever direction you're going to go in. And then the next strip is going to go on top of it, right side down. So right sides are together. The great thing about the strips is that you can mix these up any way that you want. So I'm going to smooth this out as best as I can. And then I will take it to my machine, and I'm going to do just a stitch right along that edge. I can pin it, I cannot pin it, that's totally up to you. You want to make sure your iron is ready, and then if you want to use some sort of spray to help it stay thick, that is totally up to you. I take this to my machine. I can do a 1/4 inch using my 1/4 inch foot, or I can use a regular foot and just make sure it's a 1/4 inch. Everything is set. I'm going to open this up. And I can either finger press it, you never have stuff when you want it. So somewhere in here, all this time I had my board, I moved it out of the way. And I can just find it again. I can set it under here. And if I don't want to finger press it, I can use my iron and just give it a good press out. Okay. If I choose, I can use my best press. And it'll make it a little more crisper and a little more stiffer. Okay. Then I'm going to work my next piece. We're going to follow the same pattern. I need to make sure that they're long enough. And again, it doesn't matter. I could have reds next to each other. I can mix it up with the blues. Totally up to me to decide how I want this to look. I think I'll go a little lighter. Right sides together. Again, totally up to you. whether you want to use a couple pins. We'll take this back to the machine. And again, we want 1/4 of an inch. Sometimes when you're sewing, your fabric will shrink just a little bit, or you might be a little off when you're stitching. It may be a little crooked. So it's always better to go a little bit bigger than your finished product, because you can always trim it down. But you could do it exactly at, and then you just need to make sure that you're a little bit more perfect and exact. This is a scrappy look. I'm not looking too exact, and so therefore if my pins, if my seams are a little off because I didn't pin, then that's fine. But again, you're deciding your design. You'll see that a lot of my strips are 2.5 inches, and that is because they are from binding and some other projects that may have called for 2.5 inches, and so that's why you'll see it there. Okay. We'll press that out. You can finger press, or again, you can use your iron. Okay. And again, if I choose, I can do a little bit of the best press starch. It doesn't have to be best press, but press it out. Okay. You will notice right up here that I was a little short. That's okay. I can figure this out on the back end. I got something for it, so that's fine. So you can always work this through to be whatever, it needs to be. There's always a way to fix it. But just make sure that your strips are falling off each side. Line it up. Take it back to your machine and press. And stitch. And the whole goal is to make sure that you're pressing it and getting it as flat as you possibly can, so that you don't have a lot of puckering. You can kind of press it out. The batting can be a little forgiving. So that's the great part about doing a quilt as you go, because you can kind of fudge it a little bit and make it work. Okay. Press that again open. Finger press, or I use my iron. And again, just because I've been in that habit, I'll give it a little best press. Okay. So far, this is what it looks like. Not worried about the back, but nice straight lines in the back. Can't even tell that it's looking a little quilted. Okay. And again, I'm just using, now I'm getting to the smaller edges so I can still use my long pieces, or I may have some shorter pieces in here that I could use. This is a little too short, so I'm not ready for this one yet, but anyone bigger than that one would work. So the purple, and you can audition it by flipping it over to see if it goes over your edges. It does. Nice and straight. Okay. Press, press, press. Take a little bit of your spray. Okay. Nice and tight and straight. I can come in, see if this works. It's going to be really close, but it will go right over the edge. So I can either come in with this color or use a different color and then use that one next. And I think I'll try another pink and then I'll come in with that yellow. So these are some really bigger strips. That's okay. I'm just going to take it really great to that corner. I'll go this way. Just because of the way my machine is going, it's easier to have the tail hang off the other end. And then I'll be able to use some of the strips that I have for the other side. Okay. Take it back here. Pop that open. Look how big that one is. That's fine. You could trim it if it's bothering you that it's much bigger. You could have trimmed it ahead of time in anticipation of knowing that it was going to look like that. Or you could trim it on the back end. It's totally up to you. This I will use my little rotary cutter and cut that little piece off. Okay. Again, this little best press. And that just helps. It's helping it to be real nice, tight, and flat. Okay. I have this much left. I could use a square of something just to take it off the edge, or I could continue to do strips. So if I do another strip, it's going to go here, and then I need a little strip there, or I could use a bigger piece. But I do want to use this because I haven't used it yet. And I do have some small pieces that I can use on the end. Okay. Yes, girl. I think, is it pink or what is it? Blue, something. So I have them still left. So even the ones that I did not pull out, I can use those little scraps on the end to just cover up that little bit, because it's not much. So I have like these pieces here that are really not that big, and I can use those for that end. So I have an even smaller piece right here, and that will go over here and cover up basically that whole piece. And these are just pieces from projects that I've worked on, and these are the scraps that are left from those projects. And so you're looking to make what I like to call a free project. And what I'm calling a free project is I didn't have to buy yardage to make this, and it may be left over from something that I worked on with someone else. So here is like that scrappy part here, and you can see it here. And you can see that I bunched this a little right here. It did fold over on me, but that's okay because nobody's going to see it anyway. So we have that side done. We flip this over, and we now have to finish this side. I decide what I want this to look like. I'm going to use this blue on this side. And if I have enough fabric, I could have one strip each. If I don't have enough fabric, then absolutely I'm doing a repeat. And again, this is totally up to you because this is the way you want it to look. You're only going to see part of it depending on how you use this. So it really doesn't matter that, you know, you're repeating. If you're looking at it like a placemat, you may only want one color each, like a rainbow. If it's something else you're doing, you might decide you want a little bit more of a design to it and have a pattern. But this is totally up to you. As best as I can keep this straight. I want to keep it straight. That's how I got that pucker. And I do want it to lay flat. So the goal is not to get the puckers. The goal is to work this through as best as I possibly can so that I don't have the puckers on the back because I don't want it to be bumpy. And again, we just flip this over. And we press. And you'll see right here, there's a little bit of a pucker. What I'm going to try to do is press that out. If I can't, I'll work it out. A little bit of spray base. And we'll try to work that out as best as we can. And there'll be a little bit of fudging that I'll do. The fabric itself ends right along here, so it's not really even going to matter that much. Okay. We're going to press that a little bit, good and stuck down. And then we'll think about what the next color will be. Let's go with the pink. I do want to make sure that it's over the edge, because there are a couple pieces that I didn't do that with. And then I can even fold it over to make sure it folds over that edge. Adjust it the way that I need to adjust it. And then take it back to my machine. And there's all these tails that I can cut along the way, or I can cut them all at the end. It's my rule of thumb is if they're not in my way, then they're not bothering me. If I don't have as much fabric to use and I don't have a whole lot of scraps, then I may want to cut some of those tails off just because it will make my life a lot easier to use up the fabric that's on the tails for this particular project. But I have enough scrap to last a lifetime, so I'm not worried about running out for this particular project. Okay. I was looking at something. Okay. Flip and press. Okay. A little bit of spray base. And I don't need, I'm sorry, not spray base, spray starch. And I don't need a lot of it. But I do want to make sure that everything is laying as flat as I can possibly get it, which is why I prefer to use it. And again, it's not something that you have to use. Okay. So I've got some greens, I got some blues. Again, if that fits, I can come in. It doesn't. Let's see what the purple is given. The purple fits. And again, if I want to fudge it up or down, I can, because that'll give me a little bit more of a tail, but not as much as I need. And this is just one way of doing the quilt as you go, because you can absolutely do this to make a strip look on a diagonal. It could be straight up and down, left to right, right to left. It could be a lot more mosaic-y, and you could use squares. So you could start off with a square or a triangle, make like a friendship braid. This is your look for how you want this to look. Okay, we press that open. Sometimes you can use an orphan block and go around an orphan block or orphan square from part of a block. It's totally up to you. Okay, again, just like to do my little spray. I think I did a little too much in that area, but that's okay. It'll dry up with my iron. And I think I probably have about 2 more rows before this part is done. And again, it depends on how thick the strips are. Okay. So we can come in here with this one. So it's going to take 2. This is not going to cover that whole square. But again, if I had square pieces and weren't cut into strips, I absolutely could use that to do what I need to do. Okay, and I know I wouldn't make it, so a little poking out here. And we're gonna press a little bit of my spray starch. Yeah, said it right for once, right? Spray starch. And what do I have for the corner? Because I don't have to use one of my big pieces. I could cut something off. Or as I'm looking over here into my little scrap bin, I do have some little scraps over here that I can use. So I have this blue piece, but that's not going to work because it's going to be real close. So once I get that little seam allowance, it's going to be a little peeking out. But guess what? I can still use it because that's going to cut off, but I don't want to use that. Okay. So I've got this little doohickey here. Let's use this one. Okay, we'll just take that back to the machine real quick and do that last piece. Let me slide this back out the way. Okay. We'll slide this over and we'll give this a good press. Okay. We'll get out a little bit of the spray. Not that it really matters, but because it'll help to lay it flat. Okay. Take this off the table. Okay. So with the exception of all these little strings that we have hanging, we have this here, right? And we flip it over on the back. You'll see a few of my imperfections where, you know, didn't get it as flat as I should, but that's okay because we're going to trim this up. These are all still my extra scraps because, again, I have plenty of scraps. And I'm going to give this an initial trim. I'm going to trim it down, but I want an initial trim. Lay this nice and flat. Use my janky ruler. And it's just janky because I broke it and I'd have spent too much money to get it, to just throw it away. So we don't throw away rulers. We're going to cut off just the edge of this. And we're going to cut off a little bit of the edge of this. And again, we're just doing this so that we have a space to work with a little bit better. I'm going to pull off those big pieces. The little pieces I'm throwing over here because I'm not going to use those little pieces for anything. These bigger pieces I can absolutely use again for something else. And I have a little scrap bin that my little pieces can go into. Okay. And what that does is, like, I can find a use for all scraps, which is the great part. But there are just some scraps that, you know, it doesn't make sense. If I'm doing applique, I can absolutely use these for things. If I'm not using it for applique, then they can just get cut up into the smaller scrap pile. Okay. And we have two ends. Let's do this other end. And then we'll do the long side. And again, I'm not right now worried about what I'm cutting. I want the excess out the way. And so that's what I'm most concerned about now, is just getting rid of the excess. So I'm not worried about how well this fits for the book, because there's some things that I want to audition before I do it. Okay. Do pull the excess out because you don't want to unnecessarily cut a strip that doesn't have to be cut because it's folded over onto itself. This edge is definitely not straight, and because I'm getting ready to take it and, you know, straighten everything up, I will cut off some of my batting for this, and I'll just keep that all straight. Okay. Oops. Don't think I went all the way through. Okay. And again, little pieces. Batting itself is going to something I can do with that. The bigger pieces I can keep. This is all going in the same space. I don't even know why I'm playing with that. This is a bigger piece. We can throw that down here. This isn't too big of a piece, but we might be able to use it. So we'll throw those out of the way. This will be for another project. That's a bigger piece, and this is a big piece. Okay. This is all my scrap that I don't really have to worry about because it's really small. That's going in a bin. We'll talk about what we do with scraps later. Okay. So what I have here now is this is trimmed up, And look how cute that looks. Absolutely gorgeous. And we'll hold it up just so that you can see it. Okay. So absolutely gorgeous. You can see here, this is where I missed, and that's important to me because I need to know what that's going to look like for my book. So I'm going to get my book out again. Still, you can see all the excess that I have here, all the excess I have up here. So I don't need all that. So I'm going to trim this up so that it fits for this book. That means that down here where I messed up, I can absolutely just push this up and you're not going to see it, or it's going to get caught up in a different way. So in theory, what this is going to look like when I open this book up and I center it, right? It'll look like that. Okay. I could put a pocket on the front of this if I choose. I could leave it like this. I can decide to put pockets on the inside, or I could just leave this totally the way that it is. I'm going to leave it this way just for this demonstration, but understand that you have some choices. That inside piece right now you can see is going to be caught in the seam. And there's enough up top and down bottom to trim that out. That's why I wasn't worried about this. But if I needed to, it's going on the inside and I can put a pocket over it to cover that up. Okay. So we remember again our measurements for this. And we know that we're 10 inches up. Plus the seam allowances need to be added in there. So that's about 11. And then we know that we're 15 across, with the seam allowances are about 16. And then with a little give, we said about 16 and a quarter, 16 and a half. So I need an 11 by at least 16 and a quarter, 16 and a half. So I can use my mat to help me measure. I want to start with an edge to be straight, but I also want to make sure I capture this piece that I messed up on. So using this, I can line this up, and I know I need this 11 here. I need 16 to go here. And if there's enough to cut out of that 16, right, which there is, then I can get this differently. But I'm going to say this because I just thought about it. When I measured this, this is 16, covers just the front. I've got to go on the inside too. So I need the front to just be 16 and then whatever's on the inside. So if I do 5 inches, that's an extra 10. If I do 7 inches, that's an extra 14. So I want to make sure that one end of this, if I measure it, this is about 7, if you will, right? So it can't be any bigger than 16 plus 14, which is 30. So my piece can't be any bigger than 30. My piece is measuring right now, without straightening up the edges, is measuring a little bit more than 24, which is more than my ruler. I'm okay with that. I'm just going to straighten up the edges. So I will start with the first edge, and I'm just going to trim that. Okay. And we'll set this little stinker off to the side because I don't need, that's going to just be in my scrap bin. And I'll come over here. And this is not lined up correctly. Okay, so this is about 20, so it's only going to give me, no, it's not. This is 26, looking at 2 different measurements on here. So this is 26. So 26 is going to give me 5 inches more on the inside. I need my top and my bottom to be 11. Good, make sure I stop at 11. And remember, I have this on the inside, right? So I'm going to count down. So 11 stops at, should stop at 20. Okay. And I'm doing my math to figure that out, plus looking at my mat itself. So I have 11. I'm going to go across, make sure that this all lines up, and then I can cut it across. If it's not quite lined up here, I want to make sure that I do that because I may need to trim the top. Let me come down a little bit more. Okay. So if I have no purpose for this, it goes in the scrap pile. And then we'll just trim up the top. And for the most part, it's not too bad, but it would be nice to have a nice straight line. Okay, and come over. Okay, cool. Okay. And we'll just flip that over, and you'll see this little piece is out, and we're left with this. Now, again, this needs to be 16, right? And we know that we are at 26. So that's about 5. So for my 20, that's about 5 this way. It'd be nice if I turn it. There we go. I had that right. That's like 5 this way. Okay. And then that's 5 this way. Okay. So I can comfortably, hopefully, fit the book in. And I should have some clips. Okay, and if I clip them at about that 1/4 inch on each side, then I should be able to slide the book in there to make sure it fits. Or I can lay the book on top, right? Because you just want to make sure that it fits. And there's a little extra room on this side, and there's a little extra room on this side. If it doesn't bother you, if it don't bother you, it don't bother me. Okay? So then this part is done, right? The only thing, let me move these out the way because that didn't make sense, that I want to do now is I can either turn these edges down and go through all that thickness, or again, using my scraps, I can create like a binding. So I can fold these in half, like a binding, and then I can sew it and then flip it, and that way it'll finish that corner. Okay, so I do want to pick one for this side, And I want to pick one for that side, and that's the next part that I'm going to work on. Okay, this is going to be on the inside, so it's not going to matter. So let's move this for a second. Like any binding, we're going to fold this in half. Okay, a nice straight line, that's one. Let's open that up. Let's fold this in half. Okay, and remember these are longer than the edges, which is fine because we can trim them off at the end. These are our little scraps. We can throw those in our bin. They'll get used for something later because, again, we don't throw anything away. Okay. Bring our machine back up here. And I'll do each side. Okay. I'm going to attach this to the front. And then I'm going to fold it around after I sew this down. You could use your walking foot for this, or you could use your regular foot. It's like a binding because you're going to treat it the same way, except this batting is going to be showing in the end, and we're not worried about that because nobody's going to be looking underneath the work for the most part anyway. You know, unless they're changing the cover, and then they're not thinking about it in that moment. So we're not worried about it. And then we can press it, flip it over, and do the same thing. But let's go ahead and do this side. And again, if you need to move your clips out the way, you can move those clips out the way. They're just holding the place of those 5 inches for me right now. You'll notice that neither of these are the same size. And again, it doesn't matter. First of all, if this is for me, I don't even care. But if I'm giving it to somebody who, you know, isn't going to really, like, be that picky, they don't care either. We take this, sewn here, and we're going to press that down. We want a nice, clean, crisp end. We can trim and clip. Again, if you want to hit it with a little starch, it'll make it a little crisper for you. Okay. Do the same thing on the other side. We'll move these down because we didn't move them down before. And these are just holding these in place. Okay. And what we're just going to do is flip that over, right? And we can either flip it over to work like binding. We'll get rid of all those other extra threads. We can either flip them over like this, or we can flip it all the way over. Totally up to you. Remember, it's going to show up, but it's also going to be on the inside of your book. If I want to stitch in the ditch, I can stitch in the ditch. I'm using white thread. It's going to show up. So that's totally up to you which way you want to go with this. If you're going to pin it down, you pin it down. You could tape it down. Totally up to you at this point. I'm going to come in and stitch in the ditch for it, even though, you know, it's not that big of a deal for me. Hand is never straight, so it's a little crooked, but that's okay. If I feel some kind of way about using white thread, I got other colors. And so you can see it's a little off, but that's okay. Again, this is on the inside, not that worried. Here it looks on the other side. And we'll be cutting all that excess off. We'll come and do the same thing on this side. We're just going to turn this under. You can pin it if that's what you prefer. But we're making sure that this is extending out past this. So that way, that's how I'm capturing it when I stitch in the ditch. If it's shorter than the seam, then it's not going to catch. So I want to make sure that it's wrapped around and it's catching. That's all I care about. And I'm using my finger underneath to hold it in place so that it's catching it. Okay, and you can see it here. This is extending beyond this. And we slide that out the way, and you can see here how it caught. Okay, so we want to cut these edges off. And again, I can use these for something possibly. So they're going to go back over in my pile if I can use them. If I can't use them, they go over here to be cut up. If I was really paying attention to what I was doing, I would be more concerned with not having excess on both ends, and I would have only had it on one end, so that way I guaranteed myself that I didn't waste both ends. Okay, so now this has this side done, this side done. I'm going to stitch straight across. Okay. We're going to go back to the machine. Remember, we either allowed ourselves a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch. So, depending on if I went to 11, I gave myself a 1/4 inch, a 1/2 inch. If I went to 10.5, I gave myself a 1/4 inch. I'm going to use a different foot. Just because I don't, when sometimes the batting gets caught in the 1/4 inch. So I like to just use another foot to get that out the way. Okay. And we're going to come in here because we've marked this already, and we're just going to sew or the inch, the allowance that we gave it. Okay, we'll back stitch. Okay, and we're gonna go all the way up over that binding, back down. Okay. Cut. Do the same thing on all 4 sides. Forward, back, okay. Forward, other side. Forward, back. Okay. And we're just making sure that those seams don't come undone, which is why we're doing the back stitch. Okay. So what's that? 3. And 1 more. Okay. Okay. This is done. I want to clip those corners just to reduce some of the bulk. So I cut it on an angle. Be careful not to snip your threads. Okay, didn't cut my loose threads, so I will cut all those little stray threads while I'm going around. If you feel some kind of way about, you know, what's bulking in there, you could cut more. So the only thing left that I have is this raw edge. And again, we're constructing this by making what we have in front of us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to face this. And in order to face this, I am going to use the measurements here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I need a piece that overextends here, overextends at least to here, right? So between 17 and 7. So it'd be nice to have about a 10-inch piece that's going to cover this up. So I have to find a 10-inch piece by almost 11. So it's going to go from top to bottom, and it is going to be a 10 by 11. Okay, in my pile, I have this. You're not really going to see it, so it doesn't even matter. Okay. It would be nice if we press this out a little. Let's press this out. And that's just to make sure that I get my 10 by 11 inch piece. Okay. It's just a scrap that I have left over. I love this actual piece. I can see me using this for something else. 10 by 11, right? It's going to go on the inside, but we'll do some things with it. Okay. Okay. pile. And we're going to open this up because I don't need two 10-inch pieces. If I start at 45, I go to 35. Now, if I do 10 by 11, 11 is working because it's top to bottom. I'm going to go a little wider than 10, right? So I'm going to actually go to 12. Okay. This will go in my scrap bin. And what I'm going to do is turn this under and sew both sides. So these look the same. So I have my 12 by 11. So I just want to make sure, because I don't need to sew. 11 is from top to bottom. And then the 12 is going across. Just going to go down a 1/4 inch. I can press this ahead of time if I like to get that perfect 1/4 inch. And then we're just going to sew back stitch a 1/4 inch. Okay, just did a little finger pressing. And it's a little bit more than a 1/4, but that's okay. Because the goal is here, not that you're going to see this, the goal here is that it's just turned under so that it's not going to fray as much, and that if there is some looking at it, you're not going to see that much of it. So I just finger press it to get my line, and then I go underneath of my foot to sew what is close to that 1/4 inch. Remember, we went out longer, so this is going to be almost about 11 inches when I finish with this. And that's okay, because remember, what I needed was at least 10. I'm sorry, this is going to be, yeah, almost 11, because I started with 12, right? So I wanted at least 11, okay? And I can take this back over here and make sure that everything fits over top the way that it's supposed to, because that's the key here. If it does what it's supposed to do, okay, we're going to press, we're going to attach these here just because they like to shift when you move them. I'm making sure that I cover up this in the center and I have an overlap on both sides. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna take it back. It's the lining, and it doesn't have to be perfect. Now remember, we did that 1/4 inch. I'm going to follow that 1/4 inch or that 1/2 inch, whatever I used before. That's what I'm using again. Okay, and first of all, you did this wrong. Doesn't matter, it's a lining, but I shouldn't have done it like that. And this is what happens when you're not paying attention. And I might need a seam for this. I might. Might be able to get it out. Yeah, I got it out. Okay. Let's try that again. Be like those shows, Can You Find Jennifer's Mistake? So, everything should be right size together. let's try this again. And it's a good thing, right, like that I caught it, because there's nothing worse than to sew it and then to have to seam rip it all the way across. So it was an easy seam rip because it was an easy catch. Okay. Now we can backtrack. And again, whatever that seam was, you want to stay with that seam now. So you're not changing it from a quarter to a half. You're not changing it from a half to a quarter. You're keeping everything the same. And yes, you could have basted this and then just went straight across. That's totally up to you. I kind of prefer it this way because when you mess up, you don't have to rip as much out. Okay. I'll come across that one. Slide this here. Okay. That blue just wanted to make it into the seam. We're going to go in here. And we can flip this inside out. Right? So now this is faced this way. This is faced this way. And then we're going to take each one of those corners and we're going to turn those inside out. Okay, looking good. I see some strings. Let's pop that. And we'll pop this one in that corner. Okay. And here we go. Front, inside. Lining goes in, so you really don't even see that. Here is your binding. You don't see that so much. And here is your batting, and you're really not seeing that. As with any gift or, you know, project that you want to look good, always give it a good press. And again, if you choose, you can add spray starch to it to give it a crisper look. If you're throwing this in the washing machine because you don't wash your fabric like I do, then you may want to press it before. Here's your opportunity to use steam if that's what you prefer to use. I would suggest that if you're going to take this to the washing machine, that I would not spray starch this again until after you wash it, because why waste the starch? Okay. So we're going to give that a good press. And that's just to lay everything down. A good spray starch would, like if I had steam with it, this will lay even flatter. So I'm not really worried about how flat this is or isn't laying right now. And then I can take my composition book and place it in this side. Oops. This on the table. Okay. I'm just, okay, there we go. And then we're going to have to bend that back, right? Get that on this side. Okay. Cool. And here is your final composition book cover. So here is the groovy little front. Here is the groovy little back to it. Here is the inside of it. Look how cool that looks right there. And here is the back of it. Okay. And I can feel that there's just a little bit of wiggle room in there, which is okay, because I don't have to have that snug look. But if you want a snugger look, you could have lost a lot of that in there. That's totally up to you. But here is the final product. And so this is a quilt as you go method for this look. Isn't this absolutely adorable?